Thanks for downloading this episode of the BIMTube podcast. Just a reminder that you can access all the podcasts in video and audio if you visit bim.tube. So our website again is at bim.tube. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the BIMTube podcast. My name is Stephen, and today I've got Erin Khan. So thank you, Erin, for joining me. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to have the chance to speak with you and share a little bit more about my world.
Great, yeah, likewise. And we've obviously got some topics to cover that we've thought about, but of course, for the benefit of people who haven't seen or heard one of these podcasts before, the theme is around digital data, technology, and better information management. But clearly, we'll give case studies and examples. So our perceived audience are people who are not technologists, who are new to this. So, but yeah. So Erin, so again, thanks so much. So if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself, and then critically, I think it's really important for people to understand that everyone has a different background. So maybe you could just give a quick overview of your sort of career history and how you got to the role that you have today, please. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Erin Khan, and my current role in the industry, I'm the founder and senior consultant at my own consultancy, Erin Khan Consulting, EKC for short, where I help support technology adoption in the AEC industry. But the origin story on me, if you will, so born and raised in New York. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to come out to the West Coast of the US for school. So I am a USC Trojan, so it's University of Southern California, where I actually started as undecided, didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, found that I gravitated towards building things, collaborating with others, math, and also I really wanted to have an impact in a bigger way. So I found that through civil engineering and being part of the built world. So learned a lot of really great stuff in the civil engineering program at USC. And my senior year, I had the opportunity to intern as a project engineer intern, renovating one of the buildings on campus, which was such a cool experience as a college senior. But I would say it was also very eye-opening, where I was learning sophisticated things in school. So you think about all your digital processes, sophisticated 3D, 4D modeling, and way, way more. But when I got out to the job site, it was pretty manual, very paper-based. What's this iPad thing? How exactly do I, get the most out of my computer, my software? So a lot of those questions were being asked, and I just immediately saw that as an opportunity from day one. Oh my gosh, I can basically empower the team, bring digital tools to the job site, and we can get all of our processes done more or less faster, safer, better quality, you name it. So I really was passionate about elevating things on the site with technology. So fast forward a few years, a few different roles. I was a, regional construction solutions director at the time they were called Smart Labs. They updated the name to be Co-Labs. So these were regional spaces throughout Suffolk Construction, who is a national general contractor here in the US based out of Boston. But each of these regional hubs was dedicated to bringing technology, running pilots, really focusing on innovation and growing innovation with our field users so that the overall company, like technology and innovation agility, would be really, really strong. So I did that for a few years. The last year I was at Suffolk, I was in the national role, essentially doing more of the same on a bigger scale. And then come this year, 2023, I really wanted to get out of the corporate grind, explore more. So there are so many things that I've been exposed to in this industry, and quite frankly, through a lot of the amazing experiences that I had at Suffolk. So I really had the or I would say like an itch I wanted to scratch with supporting startups as well as other general contractors with getting on board with this amazing technology wave. So that's what brings me to where I'm at today.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Erin. And it's interesting, is that the data is and the technology is just an enabler, and obviously you partly touched on the process optimization. Just one of the topics that I'll just cut to the chase and ask you one of the questions that we had to see where we go from there, which is around data pitfalls. So of course, digital data, digital transformation, all these buzz terms out there, but I'm sure, like you, it ultimately comes down to the quality of data and the rest of it. But what do you think some of the pitfalls are around data and information and models, particularly in construction, and how do we address them?
Absolutely. So I really like to frame it around people, process, technology, which I think has been brought up and probably been beaten to death, but it really does start first with that people component. And in my mind, it's not so much a technical issue with data that we have. It's really a communication and a relationship building issue. So what I've seen happen time and time again is that the personas, or the roles that are creating these technical digital tools and trying to make them valuable to the workflows and the processes that are happening in construction, there's a little bit of a disconnect because a lot of times those people aren't doing the processes in the field themselves. So there's a level of like technical expertise that unfortunately tends to be 2-3 steps removed from these processes. So you're kind of operating in the blind when you're setting up a system, when you're setting up like data integrations, for example. So the bigger issue, and it really gets to the core of how the industry operates, it's lack of relationships between the field users, those boots on the ground who are doing these processes day in and day out, back to maybe it's your back office that's putting some of these standards into place, or maybe it's a data team that's putting some of this specific data reporting into place, whatever it is. That bridge needs to be that gap needs to be bridged. There we go. A lot better. So we need to be saying, before we dive into setting up a data integration, or maybe it's specific reporting, what actually matters to that person in the field? Can I, as a data person, walk with them literally and shadow their process to see what is the story behind the data? Where is it actually coming from and why? So basically, my suggestion is to make friends with field construction workers who are the end-all be-all source. So they're the ones putting the inputs in. So be friends with those people, get to know what they care about, get to know what is important to them, because you'll uncover some really amazing stories and values of why. And it all ties back into how we work with and understand and leverage data for better decision making later down the line.
Great, thanks, Erin. I couldn't agree more about the people process. I mean, a lot of people say it at conferences, like you articulated. We've heard it before, but they don't do it. Like you've simply put it. Make friends with people, but people don't do that. I mean, maybe another question, if I can, just I would say linked to that, or following on for that, or one dimension linked to that, is around user adoption, support, and first time user experience. Have you got anything to add about that, or from your experience in that area?
Yeah, definitely. Before we move on, though, you made a really good point. Like, we say it all the time, but we don't really do it. I think one of the things that could specifically help with that is have everybody in a construction company have some sort of requirement to at least walk the job site with a partner. However often is reasonable for your role, right? Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a quarter, but just get out into the job and actually like have a buddy walk you around and see what they are doing day to day. So it is hard, to your point, to make the time and effort to create those relationships, but maybe something like that could help promote those types of collaborations in an organization.
Yeah.
And then, so that also segues nicely into first time user experience, because if you have that level of insight as to what this person's day looks like, you'll probably be able to generate a better product, a better solution or service, whatever it may be, that really speaks to what they're facing out there every day. So instead of maybe missing something off the mark just a little bit, you now can refine your solution to really target what that team member individual values as they're going throughout their day-to-day. I think for tech providers too, it's especially critical to understand what goes on the job site. So I've seen it happen in my own experience time and time again, where it's just one little button that the team member can't find. It just takes too long to get through a couple clicks. They get frustrated. They say, oh, this is beyond, my level of expertise. This isn't for me. They kind of say no to technology. They have that bad experience, and they throw out the whole tool and basically don't want to ever revisit it because they wasted their precious time. So time is outstandingly valuable out on the site. So the worst thing that you could probably be doing is, just burning minutes, not being able to kind of keep your crews productive. In the case of like looking at schedule and productivity. So if you're wasting people's time with an overly complex tool or just something that's a little too complicated, that first time user experience is oftentimes like a make or break. So it can easily be thrown out the window. So yeah, having that, I guess, putting yourself literally in the shoes of the people you're trying to reach can help overcome that and elevate that user experience so that it becomes oh man, why do I have to waste my time doing this, into a wow, this is amazing. I can't wait to tell all of my friends about this because it will save me so much time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you make to physically go out on site. I know
Yeah.
maybe in more, from my background, maybe more in operational and maintenance activities, but nevertheless physically going out, because ultimately there are people, right? We're not yet anyway. We're not employing robots, not yet. I mean, some
Not
people
quite
will be,
yet.
and
Maybe a
some
little
people
bit, but
forget.
not
Yeah,
quite. Yeah.
and I think that, like you were just talking about the user adoption, it could be something very small, like you talked about pressing a button. It literally can be people are pressing the wrong button, and it's just, I mean, it's yeah, it's a good point. I think as we move more and more towards digital, and obviously we're part of it, the digitalization of the built environment, there is a risk, isn't there, that the office people, as in the example you were giving, are literally losing touch, because there's even less reason for some people to go out into the field now. It becomes a higher risk, I would say. But have you gotten to think, maybe just looping in augmented reality or mixed reality, have you got anything to say about maybe how that's helping bridge that divide between the physical and digital?
Yeah, lot of considerations with getting out on site and how newer technologies kind of play into the whole thing. So I just had a thought pop into my head. So I think it would be interesting to also explore pros, cons of safety. So, we're losing touch with the job site maybe, but construction is a risky business. We all know this, right? So any way to get less exposure to those risks, those hazards, is in general an overall positive. So I'd be curious to see, maybe as we progress, how the data shows up as more remote technologies come into play. Very curious. So I'm not going to say which way I think it'll go, but just yet. But AR, MR, so augmented reality, mixed reality, For those who may not be super familiar, augmented reality, you can think of this as your Pokemon Go is what most people remember. If you're shopping on an app for furniture, sometimes you can pick out your furniture and see what it looks like in your room. So it's basically projecting an image into the real space, so you can see what something is going to be like before it's actually physically there. So these technologies are really fascinating with the dynamics of communication, collaboration, and I guess I'll say remote collaboration on site, and bridging that communication gap. So with some of the technologies that are available today, you can essentially wear a headset or bring an iPad, tablet out into the field, pull up a 3D model, whatever data it is that you have preloaded, and see things like clash detection, if it's a sophisticated installation, exactly where certain things are going to be laid out in the field. And the accuracy on some of these solutions are getting much better and better and better than where they were just a couple years ago. So it's always improving. So what we're seeing, or what I'm seeing from the industry specifically, is that we're going to be able to do much more complicated tasks with a team that's maybe not necessarily your traditional team that's located close to the project. They could be spread out throughout the entire world, because with this digital tool, this AR/MR hub, if you will, or communication hub, it will allow those parties to easily and effectively remote into the site, if you will, and give input and feedback in a much faster, streamlined way that's also aligned with all of the digitalization systems that are now becoming more and more standard.
Thanks, Erin. So I think maybe not the term mixed reality. I think I hope a lot of people will be familiar with augmented reality. I mean, you've already explained what it is, but have you got any examples of what that might look like? How would someone? What would it look like? What might a setup be in a typical scenario? So is it someone with a headset on?
Yeah.
What does it look like? Typically nowadays, yeah.
Yeah. So some of the examples I gave were real ones. So I recently completed a research report in collaboration with Placer Solutions. So if you want to really dive into the details, check it out there. So let's see, this information that I'm sharing is essentially a brief summary of some of the findings that are from that report. But we and my collaborators, Nate Fuller at Placer Solutions, we interviewed a whole bunch of builders that are absolutely blowing it out of the water in terms of using this technology. So specific examples are putting on, it could be like a Microsoft HoloLens. I think it's the Trimble XR10, if I have the name right, that has the hard hat component with it, to put like a complex hanger installation, for example, into the headset. So you have a field worker who is wearing the XR10. They essentially have a HoloLens with a 3D model in their view. They can look at the real world around them and say, okay, this is pretty much in the right spot. They can quickly spot check, this is completely out of line, what's going on here, and know when to pull tape, to verify measurements, do QA/QC, basically catch things that wouldn't have been caught or identified until much later on. And even better than that, if they're using the tool even earlier in their workflows, using it for layout to verify before the installation happens that your model is actually matching exactly what it should be in the field. So you have that reconciliation way earlier than finding out an oops later on. So that's one example where you're literally like in the headset verifying things in the field. There's also a really big communication aspect with design team members and with end users and stakeholders. So we have a lot of non-technical, non-construction experts that are in construction who have to make big decisions. And a lot of the times they're making these big decisions off of a sketch or a 2D architectural drawing that they don't really understand. So the technology, putting an owner in a headset, for example, to see what something will look like before it's built really helps them make a much more informed and human-centric decision. So these are some of the actual use cases that are happening today. And I'll, as a last note, add on to that, it doesn't always have to be a headset. So it can just be an iPad. A lot of people are very comfortable with iPads, very familiar with them. So that kind of makes another easy entry to communicating with sophisticated 3D models and what's actually going to be built out on the site.
Great, thanks, Erin. Just one question. A lot of the conferences I go to at the moment, they have igloos or immersive, 360. Oh, it can't be 360, can it? 180, unless it goes under the floor. It doesn't. Anyway, 180 type hemispherical tent things. Do you see them a lot? Are they becoming the norm? I see them a lot in the UK, at least at events.
I personally haven't been in a dome type of one, but I have been in a bunch of what we would call caves. So it's an acronym, a bin cave. So it's a cube essentially, and you have the projection of your model shown one-to-one, and you can essentially walk through your building in a one-to-one scale before it's built. So yeah, it is probably similar to that dome example that you're mentioning.
Yeah, I think dome and cave are probably easier words to explain what I was trying to, that's probably what I was trying to mean. Yeah, BIM cave, whether it's called a BIM cave, but yeah, that's I guess the difference is you're not physically wearing something. There might, I mean, I don't know, this is your specialism. I guess there might be something easier for people to engage with because they're not wearing something. You know what I mean? They just sort of walk in and it's there. But I'm certainly seeing that.
Yeah.
We didn't have a set question on this, but just to ask you, because I've got quite a strong background in geospatial, so things like surveying, GIS. So a lot of use of drones in a way that we haven't seen a few years ago? Are they, or UAVs or UASs, whatever people want to call them? Are you seeing a lot of them on site now in construction? I mean, I know we've had them for a lot, but what I mean is, are they being used in innovative ways? I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah. So definitely, what I've mostly seen is that it's really driven by use case and like the specific building or the specific team requirements. So one of the let's say more innovative use cases that I've noticed is using drones and very sophisticated like scanning technology and computer vision comparison technology to understand building facades and do inspections and QA/QC, as well as especially in like the heavy civil space, like bridge inspections on locations that have never been looked at or have not been looked at in a very long time, to essentially comply with safety or uphold safety requirements. So drone technology is really exciting because I think it's made kind of leaps from where it first started at. So now we're able to program in like autonomous flights. So you can essentially almost set it and forget it. There's still obviously some expertise involved with getting your drone to do it what you need it to do, and complying with all of the regulations that come with that. But it's getting much easier, and I would expect it to be much more of a commodity in the next coming years because of how prevalent drone usage is in general.
Yeah, I think that's where, again, I'm not necessarily an expert in commissioning these things, but my observation might be, I'd be surprised if people don't have them now. It would almost be that
Right.
I think a use case why you wouldn't have one, because certainly taking photos from a crane or something to look at change detection is, has value and is done, but having a three-dimensional model to check a change or a
Hmm.
delta in any. Just one thing, just changing gear, if we can. There was I know that you're supporting multiple construction technology startups, so I didn't know if you wanted to say something about that, about improving data and particularly interoperability. So yeah, if you could tell us about that, would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen many, probably hundreds, more than hundreds, maybe, of construction technology startups throughout my career. They're all very exciting. There's a wide variety of solutions out there, so I think that's something we're spending a little time talking about before we get to the data piece. So one of the biggest problems in construction that we face is no two projects are the same. All of the processes are a little different. If you look at how different construction companies do things, there's something that usually is specific to that company. So there's differences in that. And then when you get even down to the project level, there's differences in how team members approach things. There's differences in what each owner requires. There's differences in obviously the design. So all of this complexity and variation has driven what I think is reflecting or like a mirror complexity in the market of solutions. So when we look at just how much uh, data is available now to construction, it's completely overwhelming just because of that complexity factor. So where I'm going with this is now when we start try to like attempt to standardize some of the data systems and the digitalization in our organizations and rolling out much more effective processes that are linked through data, it's really, really hard to do because these projects may want to pull in a specific tool that could be completely outside of the tech stack for the organization. It could, not fit nicely in with the rest of the data systems that are already established. So a lot of times it's really tough to both adequately address the needs of the project while also providing like sophisticated data reporting and data interoperability. So that's not to say it's not worth it. It absolutely is worth it. I think as we continue with the next iteration of construction technology tools out there, there will start to be a bit more of like a standard data baseline. And a lot of the solutions will start to include more in their tool and their solution instead of just one very specific thing. So hopefully over time, the tech fatigue and the quantity and variability of the solutions on the market will start to not completely flatline out, but streamline a little bit to make it easier on the end user to maybe it's not 10 different platforms that they have to log into. Maybe it's 3. So maybe we start to get more to a place where it looks like that. And then similarly on the back end, instead of having to integrate 10 to 20 different tools and constantly curate reports, it's auto feeding into a standard baseline that is set for the construction industry. So that's a lot. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but those are some of my thoughts on that.
No, it's good. So thank you. Yeah, like I say, I normally trying to keep things abstracted, but we're talking about data, and it's what you do. It's what you do, right? So normally, if I'm talking to an ecologist, I'd talk about, but you do data interoperability. So let's let's go deep on the topic. Just one thing, and I genuinely don't know. So obviously, I'm based in the United Kingdom, and very familiar with what the central government requires. But how are things in the US as far as, is it state level? Is there a national level government requirement for data? Is it even asked for? So I don't know. I mean, how does it work over there? Are there state level requirements?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of my project experience has been on like private commercial projects, for example. So I may not be the best source of information on government requirements, but what I have seen is there are specific things that are built into the RFPs, the request for proposals that come out, where the contractor has to ensure that they can comply with those requirements before they're essentially like approved to be on the bid list. And it also is a much bigger factor, I think, with the project type. So something like a data center is definitely going to have very specific requirements in terms of data security, all of that must be complied with. So I think it heavily depends on like one, the state, and as well as like two, the building type that you're looking at.
Yeah, I guess it is somewhat different in the UK, being a relatively small country over here. So, but just one thing to ask you again. This is more sort of rhetorical between us, more for the listeners or viewers, about building smart international. Does IFC formats come up? Is that
yeah?
Could you, again, for the not for our benefit, but the people listening and watching, can you just explain a little bit about building smart and maybe the IFC, and do you deal with them?
So it's been a while since I've kind of been myself in that space. So where I'm focusing on is mostly just giving support and like technical adoption guidance to general contractors and startups. But when it comes, I kind of go back to like the augmented reality and mixed reality examples. Having a very strong like virtual design and construction manager, VDC manager, VDC team, understanding those specifics. I know you mentioned IFC. There's a whole bunch of other very technical specs that come into play, but nailing those can essentially make your tech adoption and rollout fantastic. And if you don't get it right, then you're going to be in a place where you're suffering. So those standards definitely do matter. Making sure that you're following like best practice is important. And from my perspective, I would recommend having essentially that the expert on your team that knows and can navigate all those ins and outs for you. So it's very specialized. I would also say it's probably one of my critiques, though, of the like 3D coordination space or tasks that we've now involved in construction. So we've made it, we've brought sophistication into the industry, but we've also made it so technically complex that only a handful of individuals really understand what it takes to navigate it and execute it successfully. So I'm hoping as well, some of that expert knowledge gets a little bit more democratized, a little bit easier to follow and understand, so that you don't need necessarily what I would call is like a SWAT team of, VDC team members or engineers to get the ball rolling, but it's more accessible to your everyday person.
Yes, it's a good point, Erin, that the detail is too much. I mean, that's partly the origins of this podcast. I mean, it's how deep do people want to go in the technology, and there's an infinite complexity if people want it just out there. And it's I take your point, and I think the point that you made just before that about the asset type or the project type, because I think asset type, we've got more an asset background, whatever it is you're building, the type of what is being constructed really matters. And again, people think, oh, it's just generic. And I think, no. Is it a bus stop? Is it a railway station? Is it a nuclear power station? There's different requirements. I could go off on the tangents, but just quickly, do you see owners get involved more now? So again, this is, I guess, partly a loaded question, but certainly I often represent the owner operators. Do you see them get involved more, and maybe, how can we get them more involved if not?
Yeah. Smart owners are getting more involved, and I think understanding what it all means, and why. But I think we're still kind of struggling with education and awareness in general, on the owner developer side. So um, realistically, what happens is, the builder will essentially budget for really good coordination. They'll have a whole plan laid out on how to use these sophisticated tools to deliver a more predictable project. But to the client, it just seems like an arbitrary, very large number in the budget that they don't really understand how it's going to make their project more predictable. That's really what we're talking about, right? So communicating that early on is definitely essential. I think overall, like what I see as the bigger issue is that there's no roundtable discussions quite often between builders and owners, where both are on the same playing field, just having an open discussion about, here's what I need to be successful in my role, here's what I need, and how do we kind of make that come together. So I would love to see more roundtable discussions, potentially at conferences, that specifically bring together that perspective between these, what the VDC roles and teams that are promoting very, very important and essential functions in the job, and explaining why it helps drive essentially quality, schedule, budget, safety, everything for the project. So we're not quite there yet from my perspective, but we're starting to crack, I think, a little bit of the communicating the why around BIM.
Yeah, because it's interesting, even the terminologies. I mean, it's VDC isn't a virtual design and construction, isn't necessarily even a term we use in the UK. We just say digital construction. I mean, it's even, I know that's okay because we're in different continents, so there won't be any challenges. But even the terminologies, where it's really interesting, isn't it? Slightly different jargon. I talk about digital engineering because I'm interested in the whole life of the asset. What do I mean by that? I'm not sure, but let's discuss it. That's the whole point. But I know you did talk about people process, but I mean, just as an open question and not one we had as a set one. What do you think the industry as a whole? This is whether we mean construction or digital or whomever, everybody. What's one or two of the things we need to really focus on? Is it something you've already said about educating people, or is there something else? Let's say if we had an infinite budget, which we don't, if we had an infinite budget to try and tackle one or two of the big current challenges, what are they? Is it something you've already mentioned or something else?
I want to touch on immediately the labor shortage and early education. So that's something I think every construction project team has faced, or is feeling right now. So in the industry, there's this massive gap with labor, productivity, and what's needed to kind of stay on top of that curve. There are some really bad stats out there. If you want to look it up, feel free to do a Google search. But what I think helps address that is one, getting early education into not even just high schools, but even the middle school level, to bring construction as a career path that students and potential amazing engineers and managers and field team members could see themselves doing, right? So without communicating that very early on, it's hard to be what you can't see. So showing students who are in their formative years, like, look, you can be a really badass professional in construction. It's not, the construction of a couple generations ago. We're really sophisticated. We're using 3D models. We're doing, very, very complex coordination. We're making things that will be a legacy for years to come, and your name will be a part of that. That's pretty cool. So I think back to my own experiences. So when I want to say middle school, I had the opportunity to do like wood shop and metal shop, and even learn how to do drafting, which was so formative for me to say, hey, this is actually pretty fun. This is cool. I think I can actually see myself doing some more of these types of things. So the message that I'm trying to say here is make the construction industry cool for up and coming, bright, potential new workforce members. So that's one thing that I think we definitely need. And then, so on the flip side of that conversation, we also see the tenured, outstandingly experienced, like tenured individuals leaving the workforce in droves. So either retiring out or what have you. So it's a two-pronged problem, and I think we're going to need a two-pronged approach to kind of address it. So what, in my mind, this comes down to is very high-quality learning and development systems where we're capturing the knowledge from our expert builders, putting it into a format that is easily accessible and translatable to the up-and-coming generation, so that it's not just lost and we're not reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm very passionate about L&D. So especially with some of the GPT tools, like I know ChatGPT has been in the news a lot, as well as a lot of these other technologies, we could potentially leverage some of these amazing things that are just coming out onto the market today and say, okay, expert superintendent builder, before you retire out and we lose all your amazing knowledge, how about you train an internal company GPT tool on all of your knowledge and go through lessons learned. And now that's a really amazing database and a gift, like a true gift to give to the new faces that will be now walking in their footsteps. So, yeah.
That's a really good point. So you talked it up. I've got nothing more to add about knowledge management, but certainly, data, without getting into the sort of Gartner semantics of data, information, insights, blah, 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 value, knowledge, and wisdom, which I've just said it nevertheless. I think knowledge retention, you've given a solution. I just normally throw it in there as a challenge and don't say how we might fix it. But yeah, capturing people's knowledge, I think, is absolutely key. And I completely agree with you. Because even just on a business continuity and business resilience level, even if it's on a business level, no, because you're talking broader, like a body of knowledge as well as a single business, it's a huge risk, right? It should be. It should be very high on people's risk register, and I don't think it is often.
Knowledge loss or expertise loss.
Yeah. Now, I know I'm nearly at the end of the time with you. I could certainly talk all day on these topics, and thanks so much for your insights. What I normally sort of end up doing is asking people if there's any way you'd recommend to get more resources. Obviously, there are some references that you've already referred to, which I will link to. So reports, for example. But is there anywhere else that you recommend people can read online resources or videos or other podcasts or even physical events if they happen to be, near where you go?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the conferences that I usually go to, it's the ENR Future Tech Conference, happens in San Francisco, I think around June-ish. So it's been held for this year, so it would be next year's conference, but that's typically where I see a lot of new technology startups come onto the market, where I've found really interesting solutions to pilot or test out. And also great for networking. You can always find some other people who are interested in the same stuff there as you are. So that specifically is good for like a general tech and innovation in construction focus. And then the other thing that I would encourage everybody to do, so going to a conference may is not accessible to everybody, but something that is a little bit more accessible are just individual user groups. So I always encourage, if it could be something like a Revit user group. I know they have those. I specifically champion like the Bluebeam, Los Angeles user group, LA Bug. So there are many of these user groups that are just open to anyone who's interested and passionate about using the tool. So definitely sign up for something that's local in your area, that is with a solution that you care about. And most often you're going to be connected with a whole host of other people that are fantastic resources, have probably seen maybe a thing or two different than you, can provide, insights or support. So I really want to emphasize that community, that kind of grassroots level in construction and construction tech and data. So most of them are pretty accessible through the web. So it's probably just a Google search or two away from you.
Great, thank you. There are so many other things I could ask you, but I know our time is short, so I will let you go. But perhaps to be continued. Let's hope so. So thank you so much for your time, Erin Khan from Erin Khan Consulting. Thanks for your insight and sharing your thoughts today with me. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.